All right, so today we're diving into the world of emergency medical services, or EMS. I've got all this info from emergency care and transportation of the sick and injured, and wow, there's some really interesting stuff here.
It's true, the EMS system we have today is surprisingly new. It's crazy to think about how much it's evolved, even in just the last few decades.
Right, like what did they do before 911 and those super high-tech ambulances?
Oh, get this. In the 60s, your ambulance might have actually been a hearse.
A hearse. Seriously.
Seriously, funeral homes were often the main ambulance providers. Can you believe that?
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah, and they weren't much more than a cot and a first aid kit back then. We've come a long way since then, that's for sure.
No kidding. It's like night and day compared to the mobile ERs they have now. So what changed everything?
It was this landmark report in 1966 called Accidental Death and Disability, the Neglected Disease of Modern Society. It's known as the White Paper. It basically exposed how bad pre-hospital care was, and it was a real wake-up call for the country.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that report. It's a big deal, right?
Huge. It really got the ball rolling for creating a national EMS system.
Okay, so how do you even begin to build something like that, a whole national system?
Well, you start with access. People need a way to call for help, right? That's 911, of course. And then you have those amazing dispatchers. They're trained to give life-saving instructions right over the phone using something called Emergency Medical Dispatch Systems, or EMDs.
Oh wow, so while we're freaking out, they're talking us through those crucial minutes before the ambulance arrives.
Exactly. But then you need people to drive those ambulances. That's where EMTs come in, and your book does a great job of explaining the different levels of training.
Right, because there's more to it than just EMT, isn't there?
Oh yeah, there are actually 4 levels of training and expertise.
Really? Okay, break it down for me.
So at the most basic level, you've got emergency medical responders, or EMRs. These are often police officers or firefighters who are usually the first ones on the scene.
Makes sense. They're already trained to handle emergencies.
Exactly. They have the basic training to provide immediate care, that urgent stuff, until an ambulance arrives.
So they're like the first line of defense.
Exactly. Then you step up to emergency medical technicians, your EMTs, and this is where your book really dives deep into the training and what they do.
Okay, so let's talk EMTs. What does it take to be one?
Well, there are some basic requirements, of course, high school diploma or equivalent, the usual. You also have to be up to date on your immunizations, pass a background check, and of course have a valid driver's license.
So they're not just handing out stethoscopes to anyone who walks in off the street.
Uh-huh. No, they need to show they're responsible and reliable, which makes sense. You're dealing with people's lives.
Absolutely. Okay, so what else?
The big one is completing a state-approved EMT course.
How long is that?
We're talking 150, 200 hours of intense training. Plus, there are written and practical exams to pass before you're certified.
Wow, it's like getting your medical superhero license. Speaking of which, what exactly can EMTs do? Like, they arrive at the scene and then what?
They're the backbone of pre-hospital care. They assess the situation, figure out what the patient needs right then and there, get them ready for transport, and of course, get them safely to the hospital.
So they're doing it all. What would you say is the most important thing an EMT does on a call?
That's tough. Everything's important, but people often overlook scene management.
Scene management. What does that mean exactly?
Well, think about it. They often arrive at a chaotic, potentially even dangerous scene. Their first priority is to make sure everyone is safe. Themselves, their partner, the patient, and any bystanders.
Oh, wow. I never even thought about it like that.
Yeah, it's not just about treating the patient. It's about taking control of the entire situation, which can be really intense.
So quick thinking under pressure is key. What other skills are important for an EMT to have besides obviously knowing all the medical stuff?
Well, the book really emphasizes the importance of integrity.
Integrity.
Yeah, like being honest and ethical, building trust with the patient and the community is a huge part of the job.
Right, because if you're the patient, you have to trust the person who's helping you, especially when you're in a vulnerable situation.
Exactly. And you can't forget about empathy.
That makes sense.
EMTs are walking into emotionally charged situations all the time. They need to be able to understand and respond to what people are going through, be there for them, especially in a medical crisis.
So it's not just about treating a broken bone, it's about treating a human being.
Yes. And they have to be self-motivated, too.
Self-motivated. How so?
Well, every call is different. They need to be able to think on their feet, be resourceful, adapt to whatever comes their way.
So basically, they're like the MacGyvers of emergency medicine.
Uh-huh, yeah, something like that. And then there's appearance.
Appearance. Does that really matter in an emergency?
It might seem superficial, but a professional appearance actually helps build trust with patients, especially when things are chaotic.
Okay, I get it. If you see someone who looks professional and put together, you're more likely to trust them, especially in a crisis.
Exactly. And that confidence needs to come from within, too.
You mean self-confidence?
Yep. A good EMT needs to know their stuff, but they also need to know their limits. Knowing when to ask for help, when to call for backup, that's just as important as knowing how to, say, perform CPR.
It's about finding that balance between confidence and knowing when to say, I need help with this.
Exactly.
Okay, so they've arrived at the scene, they've assessed the situation, now the clock is ticking. What happens next?
Time management becomes crucial. EMTs are juggling a million things at once, and when every second counts, knowing how to prioritize is essential.
Wow, that's a lot of pressure.
And through it all, they have to be amazing communicators, not just with the patient and their families, but also with the other medical professionals. It's a team effort, and clear communication can literally be the difference between life or death.
Right, because once they get to the hospital, the doctors and nurses need to know exactly what's going on.
Right, they need to be able to explain everything clearly and concisely, even when they're under pressure.
So communication is key. What else?
Respect is huge.
Yeah.
Everyone on the team needs to be respectful of each other, especially when they're working under stress.
Makes sense. You don't want any drama when you're trying to save someone's life.
Definitely not. And all of this ties into patient advocacy.
Patient advocacy.
Yeah, EMTs are there to be the voice for the patient, to make sure their needs are met, even in the middle of a crisis. They're fighting for the patient's well-being, especially for those who might not be able to advocate for themselves.
Wow, that's a huge responsibility.
It is, and let's not forget the legal side of things. Confidentiality, IPL, all of that is so important. They're dealing with really sensitive information, and one slip-up could have serious consequences.
No, they're practically legal experts on top of everything else.
Well, they have to be very careful and know the rules.
Right. So we've talked about what they do, but what happens when things don't go perfectly? What happens when mistakes are made?
That's where continuous quality improvement, or CQI, comes in.
CQ.
It's a fancy way of saying that the EMS world is all about learning and growing from mistakes. They analyze what happened, figure out how to prevent it from happening again, and try to make the whole system safer.
So it's a system that's designed to always be getting better.
Exactly. They're always looking for ways to improve, whether it's refining protocols or implementing new technologies.
Speaking of new technologies, I wanted to ask about mobile integrated healthcare, or MIH. It seems like that's changing the game for healthcare in general. How does it fit into EMS?
MIH is kind of like the cool new kid on the block. It's all about being proactive, bringing healthcare directly to people instead of waiting for them to end up in the ER.
So less about reacting to emergencies and more about preventing them in the first place.
Exactly. And EMS professionals, especially paramedics, are really leading the charge on this one.
Paramedics? Really? I guess that makes sense. They're already out in the community. But how does that work exactly?
Well, think of it this way. With MIH, paramedics are kind of like healthcare superheroes.
Healthcare superheroes. I like the sound of that.
They're trained to handle a wide range of medical situations, right? But with MIH, their roles are expanding even more. We're talking chronic disease management, medication administration, even preventative care.
Wow, so they're like walking, talking health clinics, going into people's homes, making sure they're taking their meds, staying healthy.
You got it. They might be checking in on a patient with diabetes, making sure they're managing their condition, or providing care after someone's been discharged from the hospital.
It's like having a personal medic on call. That's amazing.
Right. And they don't just treat the symptoms either. They're also trained to connect people with other resources in the community, like mental health services, social workers, you name it.
So it's really about treating the whole person, not just the immediate medical need.
Exactly.
This is fascinating stuff. So MIH is changing how we think about delivering healthcare. But what about the paramedics themselves? Are their traditional roles changing too? Or are they still responding to those classic emergency situations as well?
It's kind of a blend of both, actually. We're seeing the lines get a little blurry.
How so?
Well, with this shift toward proactive, community-based care, paramedics are finding themselves working in a wider range of settings than ever before.
What do you mean? Like outside of ambulances?
Exactly. Hospitals are starting to embrace this model too, so you might see paramedics working in clinics, nursing homes, even going into people's homes to provide care.
Wow, so they really are becoming the ultimate multitaskers of the healthcare world. Are we going to see them showing up at our annual checkups anytime soon?
Who knows what the future holds? But seriously, they are becoming more and more integrated into all aspects of healthcare.
It's like instead of having these separate silos of healthcare, it's all becoming more connected, with paramedics right there in the middle of it all.
That's a great way to put it, and their expertise is really valuable in all these different settings.
Okay, I have to ask, because it's something that's been on my mind this whole time. How do EMTs deal with the stress? I mean, they're seeing things that most people can't even imagine, right?
You're right, it's a tough job. Trauma, violence, grief, they see it all. And it definitely takes a toll.
I can only imagine.
That's why having a good support system is so important. Friends, family, colleagues who understand what they're going through.
It's like they say, the team that debriefs together stays together.
Exactly. Talking about it, processing those tough experiences, that's how you stay healthy in this field. And a lot of EMS agencies are doing better at providing resources like counseling and peer support groups.
It's good to hear. It makes you realize how much strength and resilience it takes to do this kind of work day in and day out. Speaking of strength, one thing that struck me in all the research is the emphasis on the physical demands of the job. It's not just about medical knowledge, it's about being physically strong too, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a very physical job. They're lifting patients, sometimes carrying heavy equipment, often working in awkward positions. It's no walk in the park, that's for sure.
And those gurneys are no joke either, I bet.
Those things can be beasts. You need some muscle to maneuver those things around.
Okay, I'm getting a workout just thinking about it. So they need strength, but stamina too, right? Long shifts, unpredictable situations, always on the go to like an extreme sport with a stethoscope.
Haha, you said it. And they have to be able to think clearly even when they're exhausted, handle the adrenaline rush of those high-pressure situations. Definitely not your average desk job.
I have a newfound respect for the athleticism of EMTs. We've talked about the physical demands, the emotional resilience, but what about communication? You touched on it earlier, but it seems like it goes way beyond just talking to patients.
Oh, absolutely. Communication is at the heart of everything they do.
In what way?
Well, first of all, you're dealing with patients who are often scared, confused, maybe even angry.
That's understandable.
EMTs need to be able to explain complex medical information in a way that makes sense, calm people down, and build trust, often within a matter of minutes.
Talk about pressure. It's like they're medical negotiators or something.
Exactly. They have to be able to read people, adjust their communication style, and really connect with people on a human level.
Wow, that takes serious skill.
It does. And then on top of that, they have to communicate clearly and concisely with other medical professionals, relaying all the vital information about the patient's condition, what treatment they've provided. Those details can be life-saving.
It's like they're translators, bridging the gap between what happened out there in the field and what the doctors and nurses need to know at the hospital.
That's a great way to put it. They're storytellers in a way, painting a picture for the ER staff so they have all the information they need to take over care.
It's incredible how much hinges on those communication skills. It really can be the difference between life and death. Which reminds me, we talked about CQI earlier, but what does that actually look like in practice? It's not like there's a suggestion box in the ambulance, right?
No, definitely not. CQI is much more involved than that. For one thing, it requires each EMT to be really committed to their own growth, always trying to improve their skills and knowledge.
So it's a culture of self-improvement.
Exactly. Thinking about what went well on a call, what could have gone better, looking for ways to do things differently next time. It might mean taking continuing education courses, practicing those really critical skills, or even shadowing a more experienced EMT to pick up new techniques.
So they're never really done learning, even after they're certified.
Right. The learning never stops in EMS, and they're trained to be open to feedback too, which is huge. Feedback from supervisors, from each other, even from patients. It takes a certain humility to be able to say, okay, how can I do this better?
That's so important, especially in a field where even the smallest improvement could literally save a life.
Absolutely. And then there's the research side of things. Some EMTs might get involved in research projects, looking for better ways to do things, analyzing data from past calls. All of that feeds back into the CQI cycle, making the system safer for everyone.
It's like this incredible feedback loop. Okay, so they're highly trained, physically fit, master communicators, always striving to be better. Are there any downsides to being an EMT?
Well, let's be real, it's not all sunshine and roses. The job can be incredibly stressful and emotionally draining. They're exposed to a lot of trauma, a lot of human suffering.
That must be really tough to deal with.
It is. They see things that most people can't even imagine, and the hours are tough, too long shifts, nights, weekends, holidays, you name it. It takes a special kind of person to handle that kind of schedule and emotional burden.
Okay, downsides noted. But what about the flip side? What's the most rewarding part of being an EMT, besides, the obvious one of saving lives?
Honestly, I think for a lot of EMTs, it's the human connection.
Maybe.
Well, they show up on what might be the worst day of someone's life. That person is scared, they're hurting, they're vulnerable. Being able to provide comfort and reassurance in those moments, to be that calm presence in the middle of chaos, that can be incredibly powerful.
It's like they become this beacon of hope when everything else feels like it's falling apart.
Exactly. And knowing that you made a difference, that you eased someone's suffering, maybe even gave them back their life, that's a feeling that's hard to beat.
I can see that. One thing that really struck me in the book was how much it emphasized the public health role of EMTs. It's not just about reacting to emergencies, it's about preventing them as well, right?
That's a really important point. EMTs are in a unique position to educate people about health and safety. They see the consequences of risky behavior firsthand, so their words carry a lot of weight.
It's one thing to hear it from a textbook, but it's another thing entirely to hear it from someone who's seen the aftermath of, say, a car accident.
Exactly. And because they're out in the community all the time, they see the patterns, the preventable accidents, the things people do that they might not even realize are dangerous. They can use that knowledge to really make a difference.
So it's like they're on the front lines of a public health campaign, armed with stethoscopes and those cool orange jumpsuits. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've talked about the challenges, the rewards, the incredible skills and dedication it takes to work in EMS. It's clear that this is more than just a job, it's a calling.
It absolutely is.
And for those of you listening, we hope this has given you a new appreciation for the EMTs and paramedics who are out there every day, ready to answer the call no matter what. Until next time, stay safe and informed.